On today's episode of Inside Startup Investing, you're going to be hearing from the co-founder and CEO of ModVans. His name is PJ Tezza, and he is a really interesting founder. I actually had the good opportunity to get to know PJ almost 5 years ago in October of 2018. That was the first time that he and I ended up meeting each other at a Start Engine event. And at that event, he started telling me about this business he was building called ModVans. At the time, it was really just kind of an idea on a piece of paper, and he was starting to test out whether there would be demand for kind of this new age, compact, custom RV camper-like van. And while the idea sounded really cool to me, I didn't really know where it was going at the time. But man, was I wrong. It turns out that there is absolutely a demand and a desire for this really cool van that PJ first created just for himself and realized there might be real demand for it in the market. Since then, he and his team have done some incredible things. First off, they've actually leaned into the regulation crowdfunding market and have raised a ton of money using Reg CF and Reg A+. And I'd say he's one of the pioneering founders who's really proven that you could continuously raise money in this market to drive growth in your business. So some of the big things that stuck out to me in our conversation is first off, just the amount of traction that his business has. They've done millions in revenue and have delivered well over 100 customized vans to date and are doing really, really well trying to meet all of the demand that they have. They, in fact, can't even meet the level of demand that they have right now. And that's one of the reasons they're raising is to lean into this growth and be able to create the capacity in their production systems to meet that high level of demand that they're seeing. The second thing that stuck out to me is that they're really planning their growth in a smart and intelligent way. Instead of getting ahead of their skis, they're building for the demand that they believe they can reach at the next level, not trying to overreach and think about demand they might have in 5 or 10 years and kind of bet the farm on the business when they don't need to do that right now. So they're being really smart about growing the business in incremental stages rather than trying to skip a few steps and grow 10 or 100x when they don't need to do that right now. And the last thing that I think is really interesting is that they're proving that this new category kind of in the RV camper space is a category that is real, that is significant, and can continue to grow in the years to come. There were certainly a lot of skeptics when he was starting this business, including myself, of whether or not there was going to be a segment of the market for what he was building. But he's proving us all wrong and doing a really good job of it. So with that, let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what ModVans is all about.
Sure. I'm a software entrepreneur. I've been involved in startups my whole career, different kinds of enterprise. I did consumer. My last big exit was for a network security software company that got up to 200 employees and sold out to private equity. So that was my background leading up into ModVans. I built things for myself, and so that's part of the ModVans story is building the first van for myself, but I didn't have a lot of hardware experience. I owned a phone company at one point, so we bought a lot of hardware and installed it, but I didn't actually make a lot of that stuff. So I had a little bit of relationship with configuring hardware and software together. But then in ModVans, my current startup, super deeply involved in hardware. We're building circuit boards, all that kind of stuff. And the back story of how I made that transition, as I was telling you, was I wanted a van. I wanted a camper van. I had tried a bunch of different things and kind of settled on camper van with a pop-up top and these certain features, and I couldn't find what I wanted. And I was between startups, so I was able to have the luxury, I guess you'd call it luxury. I had the ability to build one for myself, and I literally built ended up becoming the prototype for ModVans in my driveway in Berkeley, California, when I was between startups. And then it wasn't a prototype. It was just my own personal van. That was 2015. 2017, Lori and I moved to Southern California. We were just looking for a change of scenery, a little beach life, and I was trying to figure out what to do next. The startup work that I had been doing was kind of slowly tapering off, still paying the bills, and so I decided to build a website and just put pictures of my personal van on it because I've been being asked questions about it for 2 or 3 years at that point. And so that's what I did. I built a website and immediately got super positive feedback, people saying that if I was to sell them, they would buy it. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Usually it's the other way around. It takes a long time to figure out how to convince people to say that they would buy something. And that was the beginning of ModVans. So I launched that website. I had a goal of 5 pre-orders with deposits. I ended up with 10, and here I am, 5-6 years later, 24,000 square foot factory, 30 employees, built 160 of these vans, delivered them to customers all over the U.S.
Unreal. So let's talk a little bit about the van. What custom things are going on in it? You said you made this kind of modded out van, but let's talk about what's in it, what makes it special, unique, and what types of people are buying these.
Sure. So if you compare, like most people when they come to look at ModVans, they're like, oh, this is, an RV and a Class B RV, which would be a motorhome, is another word for it. A van with camping features is another way to look at it. So, and that is essentially kind of under the hood what we built. But what I wanted for my own use was something that was more than that. I wanted something that was multi-purpose. And also I wanted something that would fit my family. At the time, I still had 2 teenagers living at home. We had dogs and stuff. And so I wanted something that was a little more capable than what would be normally a van camper in the RV world, which would be a vehicle devoted to a retired couple, basically. And so I had these unique design features. That's what I call them, design features, because there was no technology really involved yet. It was all kind of just like thinking outside the box about how to accommodate more people in a smaller package and more flexibility. And so the design features I came up with was a pop-up top. So there's a top of the van that goes up and down. You can look at the website and see that. That's very prominent. Also inside the vehicle, I designed it to be modular because some trips were just me, myself. And also I mostly rode my bike to work, but occasionally I'd take the dogs to work and I needed to have a vehicle. And I didn't want to have a dedicated vehicle for that. So I wanted something that I could take a bunch of stuff out and it would just be me and my wife and the dogs, or just me and myself and my buddies or whatever. But I wanted that ability to put seats back in it and take my kids to the mountains to go snowboarding. So I wanted this modular capability that I did put into that first van. And that's another thing that sets us as unique today. There's no like big production manufacturer building a modular vehicle. So those are what I call design features, and we have a long list of those. We have several patents now, actually utility patents that have been awarded. One for our pop-up semi-dry bathroom, another one related to the way the pop-up top works. So we did all these interesting design things, and I learned a lot about building hardware and vehicles and manufacturing. But now we have taken all that and moved into what I call the technology realm. So we have the biggest battery available in any production RV that I know about. It's over twice as big as anything, even from the big Winnebagos and all these giant big corporations. Their battery systems, even in their larger vehicles, are less than half. And that's because I figured out this very unique way to build my battery as a 1-inch layer of the floor. We wrote a ton of software, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code. And we put that on custom-made circuit boards that control everything inside the vehicles that we build. So that battery has its own battery management system. It has an app, the ModVans app. So when you get into that vehicle, everything's being controlled by the ModVans app. And that was all built in-house. So normally, a normal RV manufacturer, they would find vendors to make those things. And if they didn't exist, they would just say, well, we'll wait until a vendor makes it because we're not going to get involved in software and hardware. That's not our expertise. ModVans is more like this parallel insults some people, but it's more like Tesla, where we vertically integrated those components. We see something that we want, and we don't just throw up our hands and say it's too hard, or we say it's going to take us 10 years. We're like, how can we do this, and how can we do it fast and relatively affordable? And with that, we have a long list of design innovations and then technology that's beyond what's available in the marketplace. So right now we have 6 different models. Each of our vehicles comes in like an X, we call it the X series with the big batteries, or a standard model if you don't want to pay the big bucks for the big batteries. And then 3 different sizes. So we have the original size that I built for myself, and it turns out there's a market for each of these different sizes because I've just learned a lot about consumer behavior in the vehicle market. And definitely if people have the option to kind of get something that is so opinionated, it's crazy. And if somebody wants a larger van, but then I have this other guy who wants a smaller van, and then people who want something that's in between. So we have something a little bit for everybody within those markets, as long as it's on a van chassis right now.
Understood. So and you got to go check out these vans because they're really, really cool. It sounds like you kind of have I don't want to say a wide variety, but definitely a variety of van options and modified options so that you kind of have something for everyone. Is there a typical type of consumer that you see come through the door, or is it a pretty wide variety of individuals?
Yeah, so we actually looked for this because early on, our investors were really like, what is your target market? And we were kind of like scratching our heads, like, well, I guess it's like us, But so we're trying to figure out. We do have some retired couples that or even retired individuals because the van does fit. We just literally delivered a van to two individuals that are both near retirement. I would say mostly active people though. So people who their whole idea of a good time and traveling is to mostly spend most of their time inside their vehicle. They would probably buy something else to get a little bit more space for the money they get. So our target market is people that have adventure in their plans, whether that's hiking, climbing, kayaking. These are the questions that we get is like, how do I fit all my toys in your vehicle? Those are the questions we get. So that's really the common thread. Within that, I would say our specialty, though, is families. So, traditionally, these vans have been really targeted towards retired couples because the big RV manufacturers, their attitude was like, well, there's no way you can squeeze enough stuff in a van to have more than two people in it. But that's not the reality. The reality is that in Europe, actually the most popular camper van form factor is for 4 people. It's for a couple and their children. And so, and that's what I wanted for myself. And then once I built it, I was like, man, this thing's amazing. And people will see it, they say it's amazing. So our about 50% of our customer base is families with children. And so we have up to 7 seats inside. And then all of our vans come with 2 beds. You can add a 3rd bed. So you can have all this stuff going on inside. Now, again, people are thinking, 6 people inside a van, that's impossible. And the reality is you don't want to like just hang out inside your van, but that's not what these are for. These are for you go to the ski resort. It's wintertime now. People are wanting to go to the ski resort. You spend most of your day at the resort and then you just come back in, to have snacks and to sleep. And then you get up the next day and you go find something else to do.
What is the price point of these vans? And you mentioned how many you sold, but can you kind of reconfirm that number and talk a little bit about your growth projections?
Sure. So the total revenue, from our lifetime revenue, they'll call it, is $15 million. And then we've delivered about 160 vehicles. It's a little more, each of those numbers a little more because we did that math about a month ago. And, we're still delivering vans and making more revenue. And then as far as our projections, we are totally limited by production capacity. So a lot of people, especially investors, are like, what's your marketing plan? How are you going to, scale the marketing? And our kind of feedback is, well, first we need to scale the manufacturing capacity. And we have scaled it. So we started off in 2,400 square feet with 2 employees, 3, I guess. And now we're up to 30 employees and 24,000. So we're literally 10 times the size we were when we started. We had an intermediate space in between there that was 8,400. So, about every 3 years we're tripling. But that's artificial. That's totally limited by capital. And so once we kind of can take off our gloves, so to speak, on the manufacturing production capacity side, then we'll get to experiment with, how do you market this thing and figure that out. So that's kind of where we are on customer deliveries. And then another, question that we get from investors is pretty common is, these are just for, rich people in California. The reality is that we sell to customers all over the U.S. If you look at our map, it is literally, East Coast, West Coast, Florida, to Washington State, down to Arizona. So it's every corner of the U.S. It's spread all across. It's not evenly distributed. California is still our biggest market for sure. But Texas is actually a big and growing market for us. And it's interesting because I don't think a lot of other normal RV van guys are really targeting Texas. And that happens to us because we sell direct and online. So anybody can just come to us. We don't filter it that way. And then as far as price point goes, the most important thing to understand about ModVans, and I did this from the very beginning, is that our vehicles are meant to compete with a family SUV. So my goal is if you're driving an SUV around, let's say you're driving, some of the most common ones would be, any of the Toyota SUVs, mid to large size SUVs. Ford, of course, makes a bunch of them. So these are the most popular vehicles in the U.S. 70% of all vehicles, 7 million units a year, are SUVs, and they're sold to families. And so our goal is to replace that. So I need to have a cost structure that's very similar to that. So the way we did that was we went out and got certified as an RV manufacturer. That gives us access to 20-year financing. So that allows us to have a higher price, but still be in that same dollar per month category as an SUV. And then there's some other interesting ways you can kind of bring that monthly cost even down below what you'd pay for an SUV. With that said, our lowest price right now is $107,000, and then we do have builds especially with the big batteries and the larger form factors that go all the way up into $260,000 is the most expensive one we've sold. It is a big difference. One of the things that really happened in the last few years is the base vehicle that we build on. We're a second stage vehicle manufacturer. So we buy cargo vans from Ford right now as our chassis manufacturer. The base price has doubled. It's literally doubled in those 5 years. So that's pushed our price up. Our first price was $65,000. And so I just told you 107 was our lowest. So we're almost double at the low point where we are now. And then the high point is, way higher. Now the high point is driven by people that have quite a bit of money. They're very serious about this purchase. That's a little bit different than kind of our target market, which is the SUV replacement.
Now, when you talk about selling direct to consumer, I imagine with such an expensive purchase, and maybe I'm wrong here, they would want to be able to interact and see these vans in person. So are most buyers coming to look at the vehicle on hand, or are they actually ordering this online, kind of sight unseen?
The first few orders that I got when people just never saw the vehicle in person, I was just blown away. I was just like, whoa, you just ordered a $100,000 it was, and now $200,000 vehicle online with your credit card. What is that? What is that? So the answer is it's as varied as the different personalities. I'm looking at our hairdos, right? I mean, we have totally different hairdos, and you look like a person, is like me, is not too serious about their hair, right? I mean, not to, that's the geek there, right? We're just not too serious about it. But some people are very serious about it. And if you look at just like the variety of hairstyles, you're just like, wow, man, there's so many people that make so many different choices about their hairstyles. It's kind of fascinating. And it's the same thing with vehicle purchases. There's just, so many different choices and prices and all that kind of stuff. So some people are able to look at the pictures online, watch the videos, and make a $200,000 choice. It's unbelievable, but it does happen. We do have a lot of people that are kind of in between. Maybe they go visit with a customer. They do a Zoom tour. And then we have the hardcore people that are like, I must see one in person. And so we actually have several different ways that we kind of deal with that. But again, our limit is not marketing, it's production capacity. So as the production capacity comes up and we have more, then we can tackle more of these problems. We actually came out with what we think is the ultimate answer for us. Now, it may work for other vehicle companies, but we're going to eventually launch this program we call Van Ambassador. And it came from, I'll tell you the little story. I had in my mind that we were going to do showrooms like Tesla. That was my vision, and I wanted a showroom in Santa Monica. Now we could talk about why I wanted it there, but that was my, I need a showroom, and it needs to be in Santa Monica so people can come in that showroom and they can test drive, they can sit in the vans. And I started doing the math of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that showroom in Santa Monica is going to cost more than our factory, and and I still have to put people inside of it. I was just looking at the overwhelming expense of that showroom. And then Lori, my wife and co-founder, she said, well, why don't we just, they could just have a van, you don't need a showroom. And that was when the light bulb clicked on all our heads. We're like, oh, we don't need showrooms. We just need people with our vans in strategic locations in the country. And then you make your appointment online, just like you do to go see a Tesla right now. You make your appointment online, then you show up at the Tesla showroom. But in this case, our van ambassador, that's what we're going to call him, is going to come drive and meet at a mutually agreeable location, ideally a public location. And there's some safety factors, but then they meet and we save $30,000 a month in rent. And there's some other interesting things about the funding aspect, but I do believe that model is 100% scalable. And what's cool about it is we already have people in locations all over the country. So, it works automatically by itself. There's people in the top markets because that's where our initial customers are.
It's a really unique model. I think that's very, very smart. And I'm excited to see how that rolls out one day. With this raise, what is kind of the square footage you can get to, and what kind of capacity does that allow you to be able to handle in the future?
So I think different people have different philosophies on raising money and what their plan is and what they're going to do with it. What we have decided to do is to take things in chunks. So we're not trying to build, the Boxzilla. We're not trying to build the Vanzilla factory. Not this time. And I'm not trying to sell my investors on that's where we're going tomorrow, we have this intermediate stage. What I want to do is I want to build the next logical step for us. Right now, we're in a facility that's 24,000 square feet. I want to buy or lease about 100,000 square feet. And I want to be able to build right now in the current location. We think we could build 10 to 20 vehicles a month. And the next location, I want to build 100 to 200 vehicles a month. I want to take that next logical step. That's what we're going to do with the money. And then after that, we'll raise more money and build something bigger. We have a plan that goes past that. But we have it all staged out, and it's kind of more traditional, the way traditional things work, where you have, they call them milestones, and you prove out your business in certain milestones. It could be that we know for a fact that 10 to 20 is not enough, to meet the demand. It could be once we have the capacity for 100 to 200, we kind of learned that that's the maximum that this segment really supports. We have in our mind that we could build 10,000 a month and still find demand, but it could be that we're a little bit wrong with that. If I do it in stages, then I can kind of pause there and say, okay, this is where we are. Let's, see what it feels like to be $200 million a year revenue company. And if we're satisfied with that, or we need to do something completely different, instead of, oh, well, I bet the farm on the 10,000 vehicle a month factory, and if I don't do it, the company's bankrupt.
I think it's really smart. It's certainly a thoughtful approach to building your business. Now, I know you've been, raising money via Reg CF, Reg A Plus over several years. You were kind of one of the early entrants to raising capital in this way. You and I met early on at a Start Engine event, and it's been terrific to watch your progress as a business, but not just on the business building side, but also on the capital raising side. And I think you've been a very wise capital raiser who's learned a lot about this industry along the way. Talk to me a little bit about raising capital in kind of this new, unique way that you and I both believe in, and how that's really enabled your growth.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is, if any founders out there, want like my kind of detailed take on it, the best thing to do is to reach out to me directly. I'm on LinkedIn, PJ Tezza. You can find me. I'm probably connected to Chris, I think, on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty easy person to get in touch with, and I'm happy to share that experience, the details of my experience. And it's really straightforward at this point. There's certain kind of businesses that I think the more common phrase that everybody knows is product market fit. You have a product, it fits the market at a price point that makes sense, and then finally you have product market fit. ModVans had product market fit from day one. But there's this other thing called investor company fit. Right. And so we didn't have that as far as the VC thing goes. VCs, venture capitalists, do not want to fund U.S. based manufacturing. And there's some legitimate reasons for that. We could go into, different things, but that's just not their thing. They want software startups. They prefer business markets because they're much safer. The consumer markets are way bigger. So, if you really want to swing for the fences, you pretty much got to go consumer. I've worked in several business SaaS startups, and the revenue always ends up at $1 million to $200 million a year. I mean, there's some exceptions like Salesforce, but they're few and far between. So anyway, if you're looking for this investor company fit, you can look at the type of business you have, and then kind of start making those educated choices about how you go. And I've reevaluated that several times, and I will say that funding has been my biggest learning journey for this process, because I thought it was going to fund like a software startup, and it has not. So we started off as one of the very earliest companies using regulation crowdfunding on Start Engine, and it took us a while to figure out how to market it. And I'll go back to the beginnings of ModVans. Those first 10 orders. When they finally came, they came fast and hot, but it took me a little while to figure out how to do it, like how to reach people that are looking for what I have to offer. And it was the same thing with crowdfunding. It took me a while to figure out how to reach those people that would be willing to invest in something wild and crazy like ModVans. And then once I did, I was able to that was scalable. I was able to figure out the formula. And so my plan after that original raise was actually to go straight. That was regulation crowdfunding. At the time, the maximum amount was $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but when you're building camper vans, it turns out it's not so much. The good news is we got immediately into revenue. So as I explained earlier, we have $15 million of revenue. So we were able to use that, to kind of fund the business as well. But I had always planned to go straight into Reg A after that success with crowdfunding. I was like, oh, we need to go to Reg A. We need to figure this out. But I had all this other pressure from other people that I contacted that said, oh, no, you should go back to venture capital. You can find the right person. You can do this. And so I don't want to say those times were wasted, but I spent a fair amount of my time and effort and energy trying to figure out the magic formula to unlock venture capital, private equity, early stage IPO financing for ModVans. And I did learn a lot, but in the end, I came up fairly empty-handed. I came up with some angel investors that are great guys, and they're on my cap table now. No complaints there. But as far as venture capital, it was a big zero. And I kind of look at that as how you say it's always disappointing when it happens. But then the other way to look at it is that it forced me to open the door of opportunity to this Reg A thing, which we're doing, which I think is going to be very successful. I think it's the right way to fund ModVans. And I think it's going to give us the flexibility that, that we need and the fan base that really works well for us that you don't get out of venture capital. The reality is venture capital are probably the not the target market for ModVans as far as our product goes. So, the guys in Silicon Valley, they're kind of, I remember when I first presented to them, they're like, nobody buys vans, dudes, like this.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to buy this? And nobody is going to take out a 20-year loan to buy a vehicle. That's insane. And I'm sitting here, you can't argue with them when you're presenting, but you're like, I hate to break it to you, but I have more orders than I can fill, and everybody's signing up for 20-year financing. I know that's how you feel about it, but anyway. And then, when I actually went back to present the second time to venture capital, at that point they had accepted that vans were cool, and they were like, cool, but still not fundable. So anyway, that's kind of the history with that. There are a lot of caveats. If you're doing some super complicated, and this is where, if you connect to me and I can share, if you're doing some super complicated business SaaS product, regulation crowdfunding might not be for you. If it's really complicated and hard to explain, you're gonna work really hard to find a lot of small investors. Whereas if you have a product that's easy to explain, and you can spend a lot of time focusing on the product itself, then I think it's more fundable. If you come into crowdfunding with a big base of users that are very enthusiastic and their success is tied in with your success, that's the perfect recipe for crowdfunding. I've seen some companies, sell out their rounds immediately with that formula. So that's a level past ModVans in terms of investor company fit.
Well, yeah, we certainly all know that venture capitalists, they just don't believe in investing in hardware, even though some of the best businesses and largest businesses in our country are hardware businesses. And
yeah, it's pretty interesting. Microsoft's consumer division well past the revenue of their corporate division, which I always find fascinating because you would never think the Xbox is like going to be big, but it's just humongous because consumer markets are massive, but they're risky. So that's the other side is like, as we see right now, we have the market slowdown. Everybody's like, oh my God, interest rates are up and consumers aren't buying. And the waves are stronger in consumer markets for sure.
Well, at the end of the day, you're proving it with actually having a successful business that's growing beyond your means and having to raise capital to be able to meet the demand that you have. So congrats on all your success. Congrats to all of your early investors who have been a part of your prior rounds and seeing your company continue to grow in value. I think that's terrific.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually been one thing that we worked on with the Reg A that we could talk about this a little bit if you're interested. So I made an investor home, which is like a kind of a dashboard where one of the biggest questions I get from investors is like, how do I see that, the value of my investment? And, I made like a concrete way that people can log in, they can see the investments they've made because we've had 3 raises so far. This is our 4th raise. And many of our investors, I was just getting ready to write this article, they've invested in all 4 rounds. I mean, that's, I'm very proud of that because they see what you're saying. They see that, year after year, ModVans keeps putting out those updates. They keep making progress and they have basically the same plan they started with adjusted for the realities of the market. And so they're willing to invest a 4th time. And so I made a dashboard where they can see all 4 raises and then they can see how, each increment in our corporate value as reflected in our stock prices, impacting the value of their investment. And I got really positive feedback from that. That kind of like solved a pain point, honestly, with crowdfunding that you actually can do with King's Crowd, for example. You can, I'm a King's Crowd user. I actually have all my investments logged in there. And then, you could go in there and say, oh yeah, here's the latest offering price and here's, what the value is. But I just did it specifically for ModVans so that, I had something concrete that I could give my current investors. And then also it kind of figured in with the Reg A because we actually wrote our own software for that. And so that dashboard ties in with that. When you make an investment on our Reg A campaign, that investment goes into your investor home, along with if you had previously invested in earlier rounds, they're all shown there together.
That's awesome. Well, PJ, thank you so much for your time. Congrats on your success. If you're interested, you go check them out and invest in their current round of funding. Thank you, everyone, for listening.